Thank you, Mr. Minister, for agreeing to give us an interview. Ukrainian crisis, Russian aggression against Ukraine is very closely followed in Lithuania. How is it important, not only for our region, but for Europe in general?
Well, first of all, in terms of Ukrainians themselves, this is a shock for millions of Ukrainians. Nobody expected that our neighbor, Russia, who pretend to be, a brother country, is going to make an aggression against part of our territory. First of all, as to European context, I would like to say that this is a very dangerous precedent Russia is doing in the 21st century, that a country is invading another country. This never happened, since '68, when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia, or '56, when Soviet troops invaded Hungary. So the first time in the European continent we have open act of aggression. And certainly this is, to my mind, a shock for all in Europe, since Europe was not ready for such kind of challenge Russians made against a European country. So it seemed to me that even until now, many policymakers in Europe have not defined yet their position, their adequate position. So for me it is quite clear that the response of the European Union and European countries members of NATO should be adequate to the challenge made by Russians.
What is an adequate reaction in this situation? Because we also in Lithuania have a lot of criticism towards EU especially and the West in general because of the reaction towards Russia.
European Union was not and is not a security institution. At the same time, it testifies that there is no common foreign and security policy within the European Union. One thing. Another thing, that almost all members of the European Union are at the same time members of NATO. So I wonder whether the response from NATO is adequate. To my mind, not. It is not. I think that the response is not, the war, but the response should be adequate to the challenge created by Russians. So this could be in different ways, like humanitarian assistance delivered by military aircraft to Ukraine, military equipment delivered by military aircraft to Ukraine, military exercises in Ukraine, which are normal under the PFP document. So these events should be the minimum answer and the minimum response to Russian, aggressive military intervention.
You understand Russia very well and much better than people in the West usually, because they sometimes have certain naiveness towards Russia. What is a thing to do now that the Russian leadership would really move back, stop, or at least stop in Crimea? Would be targeted sanctions against them, assets freezes, not allowing them to enter EU. What is that they would really understand as Russian leadership, authoritarian leadership?
Well, the measures you have mentioned, like sanctions, economic sanctions, personalized sanctions, so they are appropriate at this moment, but they are not adequate enough. The measures I mentioned, paramilitary measures, must and should be the adequate response to Russian aggressive actions.
Do you think they'll stop in Crimea, or they will try to provoke certain unrest or even move in the military in the east and south of Ukraine?
It depends on the reaction of Ukraine and Ukrainian armed forces. As you know, over the Ukraine, dozens of hundreds of people and thousands of people are staying in lines to be enlisted to a military service. So this is supposed to be the nationwide movement. How far Russians are going to invade? They are pretending that as though they are not making aggression, and this is clearly in order to mislead the international community, as though they are not the party to the conflict, according to the United Nations Charter and specifically the status of member of the Security Council. So as soon as they are a party to the conflict, so they have certain responsibility in the Security Council, but they are pretending and taking as idiots, millions of people living in Europe, that they are not invading, that these are not Russian troops. This is for naive people.
But we even know the numbers of units which are from Russia.
Of course, we know, but they are pretending that they are not Russian military. They are pretending, in particular, in order that Russia be not considered by the UN Security Council as a party to the conflict, because the party to the conflict cannot or should abstain from voting on any UN Security Council resolution, party to the conflict. So that's why they are creating, very naively, that they are not party to the conflict, but they are, 19,000 military, special military forces, on Ukrainian territory. So they have created and designed this scenario how to get the control over the Crimea. Long ago, according to the advisor Ilarionov of Putin. So that means that Russians have designed this scenario, and this scenario, for the implementation of this scenario, they had to find, puppets in the Crimea. They found those puppets around Mr. Aksionov and the others, and their own military invasion, military operation. So all was done by Russians, and for the time being is implemented by Russians.
The presidential elections in Ukraine, today there was initiative that they should be postponed. What do you think on the perspective? They will take place on the 25th of May as planned, or they will be postponed?
As a member of parliament, I have no doubt that the presidential elections will take place on 25th of May. Of course, we understand that some members of the parliament who represent the dictatorial regime, and still members of the parliament, they are trying to play the game which was designed in Moscow, and where Yanukovych still has the role to play under the scenario of Moscow. And under this scenario, they are acting as though the election should take place later. So we, the representatives of democratic forces in the Ukrainian parliament, will not allow any changes of this date.
Will there be parliamentary elections after the presidential elections?
Nobody can tell you for sure, but taking into account the lessons of failures after the Orange Revolution, I think that it would be necessary for anyone who is going to be elected as the president of Ukraine to initiate early parliamentary elections, because with this composition of the parliament you cannot, make Ukraine moving ahead on the road of democracy and united Europe.
Association treaty will be signed now.
My vision was and is that the association agreement should be signed as early as possible with the new Ukrainian authorities. And I don't understand why the European Union still continuing to wait whether to sign the agreement now. Finally, the European Union agreed to sign the part of this agreement, the political part. I posed the question to myself, if in Vilnius the European Union was ready to sign with a dictator, this same agreement, why the European Union is not ready to sign this same agreement with democratic authorities. So this is the question mark. I cannot find the answer. Maybe you in Vilnius can find it.
Lithuania and majority of Lithuanians, biggest majority of Lithuanians are really following, as I told you, very closely the conflict and with great sympathy towards Ukraine. What is, for the member states of the EU who are very pro-Ukrainian, what they should do now in the framework of EU and other organizations? What has to be done now?
Well, we are grateful to Lithuanians, to Lithuanian leadership for the position it took from the very beginning of this crisis. So this position of support of democracy in Ukraine against use of force for the European integration of Ukraine is valued highly in Ukraine. And Lithuanian leadership is consistent in this regard, and may I remind you that it was the President Adamkus who helped to settle the political crisis which took place in 2004. We value greatly the role of your President, Grybauskaitė, Foreign Minister, and the chairmanship of Lithuania in the European Union for making its utmost in order to diffuse this crisis.
Thank you.
Ačiū.